Okay, people are filing in here. Appreciate everyone joining us today. We're actually going live on both YouTube as well as Zoom. And then also today, kind of a surprise, we're going live on Periscope as well. So for those of you that are seeing this alert on Twitter and watching on Twitter, welcome. For those of you who are on YouTube, there is a chat window here where you can submit questions to myself and the guests, who I'll introduce here in a second. And then for those of you who are joining in Zoom, we have the Q&A function. You can go ahead and submit a question at any time, and it'll queue up and we'll address those as they come about. So today on this webcast, I have two very special guests, two people I respect greatly, who are both expert minds in the fields of handicapping, sports betting, advantage play, basically getting an edge. And they are Ed Miller and Matthew Davidow. Good morning, gentlemen, or well, not good morning. Good afternoon, gentlemen. They're both in Las Vegas. I'm in New Jersey. I've got my happy hour beverage, a little Leinenkugel Summer Sandy.
Nice.
Matt's got a beverage. Ed's at the office.
I am, yes.
I went home so I could start my weekend early. So one of the nice things about quarantine is I get these weekends off, and I'm taking advantage.
There you go. There you go. So, gentlemen, welcome. I'm glad you could join us here.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
So I don't know about you guys, but one of the things here with this quarantine period I've found is there's a sort of a sense of I got to get something done, right? I got to do something to come out of this a better person, a better something other than when I went into it. Briefly, I'll ask both of you. What is something that if the quarantine were to end tomorrow, what is something that you would regret not getting done? Or conversely, what is something that you were proud that you got done during the quarantine period? Ed, I'll start with you.
Sure, yeah. So, I mean, I have to say, like, just to be honest, like the first, I don't know, I want to say like 2 to 3 weeks. I mean, I didn't really get a whole lot done. I did a lot of like refreshing Twitter and like, I mean, this is like in March, right? And I think this whole period has been a little bit of a shock to everybody. And I think I'm pretty sure very few people have been as productive as kind of they were before this all started. So it's kind of my take on that. A little bit over time, my production's kind of getting back to normal, and here I am back in the office. I'm, working. So, I don't know. I would say, I mean, probably, I don't know, some software stuff that could have been written. I mean, we had just launched with our first customer when all this started, which is like really great timing. And and I think I wanted to have, I guess, a little bit more software written by today than we have, but we'll get it written. It's an ongoing process. Yeah.
I was sure this was my chance to learn Spanish. I've been trying to learn Spanish for 11 years. My wife's Costa Rican. My son speaks fluent Spanish. I was sure this was it. No excuses. 1 hour every day. First 5 days, I was golden. I got to tell you, I don't know any more Spanish.
Yeah.
That's interesting because I know two other people that use this break time to learn Spanish. And one of them feels they didn't get far enough. The other feels like they're now pretty fluent in it. So learning a new language must be something that a lot of people have looked to try to do during the quarantine.
Yeah, that makes sense. I picked up the Duolingo, 6 months ago. My son does it, and I don't know. I've always had trouble learning languages, so didn't really get very far.
Yeah, I was thinking of learning a new programming language during quarantine, and that didn't happen. But this sort of what I'm doing now, this video editing and video production language, it's basically a different language, and that's what I've taken my time to do.
I've really improved my Twitter skills. I can, get through left-wing politics, right-wing politics. I sort them faster now. Had no idea I could be so good at reading news.
Yeah. That's funny.
Let me throw a question out to you now while we're still got some questions queuing up here in all the different feeds. My question I threw out to Rufus and Spanky when I had them on about a month ago, and that is, if you could have dinner with someone in this industry that we're in, on any side, on the betting side, on the booking side, living or dead, present or past, who would you choose to have dinner with if you had that choice? Ed?
I suspect I might be stealing Matt's too. I don't know, but
No chance.
No, okay, maybe not. So my answer, I think, would probably be Roxy Roxborough. I don't know him. He's reached out to me a couple times on Twitter, and he just seems like I'm so impressed with him. Knowing his history, and then just seeing how sharp he is, and how he's kind of one of the greats who helped build the industry, decades ago, and then just to see how modern his outlook is today and how much he understands. And, he just seems like just an incredibly sharp guy, and I'd love to, spend some time with him.
That could have been my answer. I mean, he's like kind of the original, like at least of our, the last half of the 20th century, like sharp better. And I really would like to have dinner with him. But I was thinking about this earlier today. I was watching the DraftKings stock go further up. And I'm thinking, well, you get to have dinner with one person. Maybe it's not the right idea to have dinner with someone who's probably mostly like-minded. Probably his mind works the same way. I think I'd like to have dinner with Jason Robbins.
Okay.
I mean, here's somebody who we've always talked about, like me and Adam, we don't quite understand. And then here he is. He's successful after successful after successful, obviously with a completely different line of thinking that, I know that me and Ed share. I think I'd like to, it would be a more unique learning experience.
I agree with that completely. Not to belabor the point, but, I was definitely a DraftKings doubter, 8 years ago when they came out, 7 years ago. And I'm done. I've been done doubting them for a long time. Honestly, yeah. I kind of chalked that one up as an L and said, let me kind of figure out what they're doing right and just kind of watch. So yeah, I agree with that for sure.
Wow. All right. That's an interesting choice. So
yeah,
for anyone keeping score, we have 2 for Billy Walters, 2 for Roxy Roxborough, and 1 out of left field there about Jason Robbins. So interesting. We'll see next time I do one of these happy hours. I'll take the same poll and see where it goes. For those of you who might have missed the last time I did this poll, I chose Roxy Roxborough as well. My other 2 guests chose Billy Walters. Okay, so the 2 of you wrote a book, and that book is, I can't seem to praise it enough. It is, I believe, a landmark book when it comes to sports betting, and it's only a year old. I was actually just looking today. It came out mid-May.
Yeah, almost a year ago, yeah.
So what are your thoughts on how that book has kind of taken a hold of this industry? Is it as more received as you thought it would be, or do you feel like it can get more traction as more states come online and people warm up to sports betting? What are your thoughts on the book?
I'm thrilled with where it's at right now, to be honest. For those who don't know my history, I've written a lot of books. I started writing books 15 years ago. I started writing books with poker when poker was booming, and I kind of saw what the poker boom did to book sales. And, it's sort of a synergistic relationship when you're writing books in something like poker that's blowing up, where, yeah, you're benefiting because the industry's blowing up, but hopefully the knowledge, what you're putting into the book is, contributing in a positive way to the industry too. And so that was kind of the goal behind the book was, sure, we want the book to sell copies and people to read it and whatever, but at the same time, we said, well, can we help the industry? Can we help players? Can we help whoever by writing the book? Overall, it's definitely outperformed my expectations. I kind of had it in my head, well, maybe I'll write about sports, I don't know, for 5 years. Thought about writing about a book about DFS at one point. And I kind of always said, well, I don't think the audience is really there. And so I didn't. And then when we wrote this, I was like, now with sports betting expanding, I think the audience might be there, but I'm not sure. And it's been clear that it's there. And, the more this expands and the more kind of buzz that's around it, I think the book's going to do well. I'm very happy with how the community's received it. And, hopefully it's a positive contribution to the community.
I'll say that your compliment, your calling it a landmark book, to me is the nicest and most impressive compliment I've heard on the book. I mean, that's absolutely, it's certainly what we were going for. I remember we spent an inordinate amount of time on titles, and like literally, and this was me and Ed were like, we spent a lot of time pacing around my swing set over there, literally back and forth on titles. Ended up with this one, which Ed calls a B title.
Why's that?
I have a whole grading system for titles. But I think this is a little inside baseball on the book business, but obviously I think titles are extremely important, like absurdly important. I also think they're ridiculously hard. I don't ever really feel like I've A+ nailed a title. My A+ book title is The 4-Hour Workweek. Like that one, but that Tim Ferriss book, right, that he came out with. I mean, that book, that title just says it all. That title sells 30 million copies right there. I mean, forget what's in the book, And so I've always kind of every time I come out with a book, I want to come up with the best title I can for it. And yeah, we put real time and effort into thinking of it. And after all of our time, we came up with The Logic of Sports Betting, which I think is a great title, but I think is not going to, on its own, sell 30 million copies. I think some of the writing in the book is going to have to do the work.
And it has absolutely not sold 30 million copies.
It is not yet. No, not yet.
It's only been a year.
Well, the other thing we were really, really going for in the book was writing something that wasn't going to get easily dated. We obviously didn't want to end up spending a lot of time updating the book, and we cut a lot of things that were very timely last year, and unfortunately, I think still very timely a year later. I don't necessarily feel like a ton has happened with the U.S. regulated industry in the last 12 months, but I definitely think that someone will be able to pick up this book 5 years out, 10 years out, and get 80+% out of it what they would get the minute it was published. I
agree with that. By the way, I think the best title I've ever heard, Ed, for a gambling book is Mason Malmuth's How to Make $100,000 Gambling Professionally.
Oh, yeah.
And if you've ever read that, you're not going to make $100,000 gambling professionally based on what that book says.
Right. It's a good the other, though, the eat, sleep till noon and play poker. I forget the name of that. But that's a good title too, that one.
Yeah. Okay, so we have a question in here. Comes from my friend Pat Parada. Pat used to be the head trader at Resorts Casino online, and he's a great mind. He knows this industry very well. He's worked all around the world, and he actually tails off of Matt your request to have dinner with Jason Robbins, and he says if DraftKings were to come to you and say, "We bought SB Tech, but it's garbage," that's his words. They don't have any models, algorithms, and we want to differentiate in live betting. Thus, we want to buy your company, Deck Prism Sports. What's your answer if that were to happen?
Do you want? I've been talking a lot, Matt. Do you want to answer this? Or?
I have
an answer.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd be happy to talk to him. I think the work we're doing is good, and I think it's worth something. And if anybody, including or especially DraftKings, came to us and said, "Hey, we like what you're doing too," and is there a way to work together and make it work for everybody? Absolutely. That's what being in business is all about to me. Is building something that has value and finding partnerships.
One of the things about our product as well that I think is perhaps misunderstood is while it's somewhat aimed at a bookmaker who wants to have no delays, and we can talk about that later, for sure, as far as fairness, etc. But no matter how you're planning on operating, you should always want the sharpest number. It should always be worth more than the more accurate the prediction is to start with, the easier it is to trade off of, the everything is. I'm kind of surprised, honestly, and this is not speaking at all toward our company, just in general, the entire landscape. I'm kind of surprised 2 years out, and really 1 year after there were already some established states, I mean, New Jersey, where I'm really surprised that there aren't other, companies that I see in the marketplace, like aiming at a more a higher level of prediction, I guess, to start out with, rather than simply taking a market number and seeing what happens.
Yeah, one of the, I mean, and we found this internally, just comparing. I mean, honestly, I mean, for viewers who don't know, I mean, we have a company called Deck Prism Sports, which I think is what Pat was talking about, and our company, is the core of our company are these in-play betting models for American sports that Matt and I have been working on together, for years now, long before we even started Deck Prism Sports. And, and obviously those models go through development. Last year's model is not as good as this year's model because we have an extra year worth of work. And one thing we've noticed, just, now that we're, building this company and basically trying to, I guess you would call it, scale those models, run the models, on every NFL game on a Sunday morning simultaneously, run the models, when NBA comes back on every NBA game, at the same time, is, you need people to run the models, put numbers up. And the better the models, the better what you start with, just the easier it is for everything operationally. It's just much easier to, hire guys, teach them how to use the models, teach them, the ropes, and have them put up a good product. I mean, the more work you put into that core that's at the center of it, I mean, there's just so much value that just spills out of that. And that's just, yeah. I mean, and that's become so apparent to us, just even internally, and I know it's true, broadly too.
So that kind of tails into a question that I actually personally had for you guys was, when creating your in-game algorithms, you're obviously basing it on the part of the game that you've seen and the part of the game that you've yet to see. And the part of the game you yet to see is closely correlated with the line on the game. How much of that is, like, walk me through some of that process where, how much of that game line are you using when creating your in-game line? In other words, like, are you using just the half line and then augmenting that out to the full game? Are you using a quarter line? Are you using, basically, I'm not asking you to give away the secret sauce recipe here, but talk to me a little bit about how the process goes in creating that algorithm.
One of the things that we do really well is we don't pigeonhole anything. Like, there's nothing is stuck in our models so everything has a way to be fluid, whether it's during a game, before a game. Everything has a way to be changed, either automatically or by a human, whether that human is a data guy, the first level trader, or whether the human's the supervisor in the room. Nothing's ever stuck. So you never end up in a situation where, okay, well, the model says this, but clearly, I mean, anybody watching this game knows that, that's not a very good price. And then every time a model does that at any point, that just leaves the trader to basically make his own line. What our models do well is it really melds the trader and what the trader can do with all of the data and, various intricate and not so intricate ways of looking at the data that we think provides a distribution curve to where the trader can easily make a couple quick things on the fly and really hit the fat part of that curve very often.
Yeah, like, the way I think about it and sort of describe it is the entire problem is how do you incorporate all the new information that comes in to update your price, right? Like, it's all about information. It's from the moment you put up that market in the very first time you put up a market, information starts coming in. Some of that's betting information. People bet into the market. Some of that is news. Some of that is, injury news. Some of that is, roster moves. Some of that is projection information from analyzing data. Some of that is, whatever. There's just a whole stream of information that starts coming in from the moment you put up that first market number. And your job is to, as accurately as possible, reprice that market for every new bit of information. Now, pregame, it's the same problem as in-game, except pregame, the information comes in much, much slower, right? So pregame, if you got an NFL week, right, there's some betting information that comes in, and then there's a lull, and, on Wednesday, I mean, there's not a ton of information coming in on a Wednesday, and then information starts coming in. And then as soon as that game starts, it's the same problem. You have to reprice that market with new information, except the information starts coming in by the second, right? Now they're running plays. Now things have happened in the game. Now they're scoring. Now there's real-time injuries. Now there's still real-time betting information. There's all this information, but the pace of information has like 100x. And yeah, what Matt said is our entire approach is, how do we basically create a funnel that sorts through that information in a meaningful way and gets to the best answer possible, like that, the best answer we can come up with given the information. That's basically the problem, and we've kind of built everything around trying to do that efficiently.
We have an automated way to determine when to pull something straight from a model or straight from data, and when to go with something almost complete subjective, and
right.
when everywhere in between, and then for lack of a better term, like smooth system that integrates both in real time very fast.
Right.
So one reason why we're never, one of our partners is always concerned, for good reason. I like to talk, and I'm very proud of all of our work, and he's always concerned that I'm going to say something that someone's going to take and like run with. And I always feel good that our actual secret sauce, I can't even really explain it. So no one's ever getting it out of me.
Right.
Fair enough. Okay, so for anyone that is joining us late, if you are on Zoom and you want to audibly ask a question, you can raise your hand and we can enable your audio and you can talk to the three of us, sort of like a talk radio call-in show. If you are on YouTube, there is a chat there. You can go ahead and enter a question in the chat. I'll keep an eye on that. And then also if you are on Periscope, our unannounced venture into Periscope today, thanks to a tip that Whale Capper gave us, you can go ahead and put a question there in the chat window on Periscope, and I'll address that as well. Speaking of Whale Capper, I had the pleasure of doing his podcast this week, and he has a question for us in the Q&A. The question is, in your opinion, is there an art to live betting that is as important as having a pricing model that creates an advantage? Does timing your market entry and managing risk play an important role in being a successful player in live markets? Who wants to?
I think so, for sure. I think, one way to look at it is if you start with if you're betting the game with a model, well, you got to know what's going into the model. It's much easier to bet a game with a model than it is to put up a product the entire game with a two-sided line at all times that, people can bet into, unlike most places in New Jersey that, have a bunch of bets open, but can you really bet into them? Sometimes not. But if you want to actually be offering, two-way markets that you can bet into without a delay, that is a much harder job than having a model that you use to bet with. I think anybody could agree to that. Certainly, I'm sure Whale Capper. So to me, a lot of times it's if you're looking at a situation, say in game, where there's 20 to 25 reasonable 2-minute markets, maybe with a reasonable limit if you're lucky enough to live in a place that's doing in play, and I think we all will soon enough here. And in those 25 times, if there's always value on one side, well, you're quickly going to end up with a position you don't want, with too much risk. So
and you could also be wrong.
Well, no, for sure. I'm going to where there's what people call an art, and that art is to have an understanding of when to pass on a bet that maybe you think is 2% good, to pick up a bet that's better, when to and some of the very best traders I've ever seen are really, really good at taking what in my mind are bad bets. And the very best, the very, very best are the people that can consistently bet both sides, even if they feel like there's value on one side. Maybe Spanky being, one out there. We have another partner that does our trading that is just fantastic at this, and I would definitely call that an art.
Yeah, I think like one thing, not to belabor the point, but one thing that's definitely true about these live markets is there's a predictability to them. Like you can the pricing, at least currently, is such that you can kind of know in certain circumstances, well, this is 2%, but in this spot 3 minutes from now, it's going to be better probably. You know, just from past experience, there's just a lot of like just being involved and knowing how the stuff works as to, well, actually I shouldn't, I probably shouldn't take this 2% here because whatever, or you know what, this is even money, but I'm going to take it because I want to get something that I'm going to have later that's probably going to be there for me, right? So that kind of stuff that is definitely beyond just model says this, market is that kind of heuristic.
And the thing about the live markets too, I mean, there's so many timeouts, and there, you can build a big position really fast. As anyone that's tried to see a long time ago, I had a friend of mine. This was built a model, and he was confident in it, and he started betting on this as an NFL model. And I don't know if you guys remember, there was a game. It was the Chiefs and the Colts, and this was must have been in the Peyton Manning area. I think it was Alex Smith and Peyton Manning with the quarterbacks. I don't remember. There were. I think there was the Chiefs had a very big lead in Indianapolis. Indianapolis came back and won this game. And his model just consistently gave him value on the Chiefs. And I might have this wrong, but the team that was winning. And then, of course, when the other team came back and won, well, all those bets lost. They were all obviously correlated and, going, more art would be balancing that position by, perhaps taking bets on both sides while building up, EV if it was the Chiefs, if I had the teams that won and lost right, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would add here is that I absolutely think there's an art to it, because one thing when you're in-game or live betting, line shopping is pretty much unattainable. You can do some quick line shopping. You can have your Don Best screen up to see the major sites, but you really kind of need to know what you're looking for and then fire on it, because it's not going to be there long enough for you to kind of pussyfoot around and check all the sites.
I mean, I don't know, the state of New Jersey from what we saw last year didn't look great, but I really think that Colorado might change that. And particularly when more and more places have some version of a desktop app, I could definitely see a situation, maybe not this year, especially with, we don't know exactly when sports are coming, et cetera. But I think that Colorado and other states that open up with similar regulations, I do think there'll be enough in-play competition where a bettor can have a few different accounts open on the desktop, definitely looking for line shopping, looking for, scalps and arbs, and, I think do well. I think the Colorado market and other ones like it who I'm hoping to follow, maybe Michigan, maybe knock on wood, New York in a couple of years. And then maybe this starts to change New Jersey. I think that particularly in play, there are going to be markets, and I think those markets are going to be playable and imminently beatable, particularly with, scalping and arbing. And, we're hoping to, we're hoping to have some clients in those markets as well. And like to think that our lines will be sharper and you'll lose into us, but there's a lot of games, and in play is about making a lot of lines a lot of times. So yeah, I don't think that the current landscape of in play is going to be the same come even this football season if Colorado gets going in those games.
That's a good point. And speaking of that, there's a question here in Zoom from JA. He says, hello from the Sharps in the Raz Slack chat. Will you still be displaying your Deck Prism in-game product on the website this football season?
I don't know. I don't know. We did. So so last year we're basically, we think we have the best NFL in-play model anywhere. That's what we think. And we realized thinking that doesn't mean a whole lot. So our basically business strategy was week one last year, we just kind of said, well, let's just blast it on our website. And show everybody that we have the best model, and whoever can watch it can evaluate it for themselves and can come to their own conclusions. And based on how giving everything away for free ended up, if you give something good away for free, sometimes people take it and run with it, give them an inch, take a mile type of thing. We kind of ran into that a little bit. So we paywalled some of the models, some of the games, but we tried to keep at least one game up free at all times on that premise of, we think we have the best and we're going to just show it in real time and you can decide for yourself. In theory, I like that. I mean, I'm happy that we did that. But I could see business reasons getting in the way and preventing us from doing that. I don't know. So I think that's a TBD. I'd like to. I mean, I like to help people out by having the model on the website, but I would say it's TBD.
It made it interesting to watch games that you guys had your model running on. I mean, it was fascinating to me. I was trying to kind of reverse engineer your work a little bit as I watched, and it was an interesting exercise. And it was.
I'd love to hear how far you got reverse engineering.
Well, I can't say it was definitely profitable. Oh, in terms of my reverse engineering.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't ask you a question about your methods if I knew the answer already.
Right. I mean, I think it's hard to reverse engineer, which is why I'm curious how far you got.
Let's go over to YouTube here. There's some questions that have been stacking up over here. We'll fire through some of them. Have you and your group, and I assume this is the Deck Prism group, done any modeling on the COVID-19 pandemic? If so, what are your thoughts for the aggressive stance President Trump has taken on opening America back up? Ed, you must just be.
I wonder what the questioner thinks.
Yeah.
So I mean,
it's usually the case when you have a question like that. They have an opinion, but Ed, you're the one that's handled this stuff.
I've not done any modeling on it. I think it's kind of a hard problem to model. It's one of those things. It's funny, people have kind of taken apart that Imperial model because I think they sort of published it, and people have been taking shots at it, and I think people are being kind of mean, but at the same time, I mean, I see the problems with the model. By its nature, these models you change a small input or a small assumption and the answer just diverges on you because it's an exponential process. It's a tough problem. I kind of said, maybe not. I'll just keep working on our business. So I don't know. I don't really have a strong opinion. I think the whole thing sucks.
One database, like from a data perspective, one thing that I was actually spent way too much time telling our guys this morning when I went off on a tangent in the office was part of the part of the where people talk past each other just completely with this whole situation is what question are you trying to answer? So when you say even like COVID deaths, what does that mean? Does that mean, say, all deaths that were, caused by the pandemic that you might use to judge, say, a pandemic versus a war down the road, which, for instance, may include the guy that had a really bad stomach pain and didn't want to go to the hospital because he was scared to get COVID and then died in his home, for instance? Or are you trying to answer the question of what is the best public policy? Well, that takes a different set of data. And most of the data we see, it's very unclear as to where that data comes from. How is it derived? One of the things that I mean, we spend a lot of time and money on is data. And every piece of data that we use, we know every single thing about it. It's we know where it comes from. We know where our possible error levels are, like with the data itself. We know if there's any bias in the data collection. One type of data that I can't stand is what I call subjective data. For instance, assists in the NBA. Well, assists in the NBA, it's some guy at the arena making a determination if another player affected a basket, right? So to actually get a good assist data, you're going to need to know who the guy at the arena was, and then you're going to have to figure out a way to grade them. So like if you take this to say COVID deaths, you got to figure out who's judging the deaths, what question they're really trying to answer. Was one guy sick and now we have a different COVID judger? you can't possibly, and certainly what we found in sports, and maybe political data is different. I feel like our political friends were like shaking their heads and laughing along with me. But at least in sports, I guarantee that if you don't know exactly where your data comes from, your data has bias errors that aren't noise that you don't know about that could easily lead you, especially if you throw enough darts at the wall and it's like a data mining type exercise,
Right.
to completely wrong conclusion for for wrong reasons that aren't even random. There's an actual bias to it. So everything starts with having really, really good, very clean, very accurate data. And I mean,
I think this is why, incidentally, I mean, a lot of sports models are notoriously not so great. And I think that's a big reason why some of the modeling work people do ends up, falling flat, is because they just kind of take data fidelity on faith a little bit, some of the data, and they don't really, they just kind of take the data like it's right, and it's just not. And and I think I've seen that exact mistake, in this COVID modeling. I mean, people were modeling on this Chinese data, and I was just like, I was like, what are you doing?
And then to take it one step further, you want to know what question are you trying to answer, and am I able to hold whatever variables constant I want to hold constant, and then measure the variables I want to measure to get the answer that I'm going for. When it comes to COVID, I don't think that people are even asking like specific enough questions. Like if even an answer like, okay, what quote unquote should public policy be? I was asked this morning. What do I think public? That's not. I don't think you can even answer that, because what are the goals to this public policy? Is it re-election? Is it power? Is it money? Am I trying to save the world 20 years from now? Or do I care more about next year? How much should I care about myself, my country, my tribe versus somebody else's? Without those questions answered, there's not a possibility of a right answer. Right. So therefore we have a perpetual argument.
Right.
Okay. Well,
there you go.
And by the way, you made a really good point in there, Ed, and Matt did as well, is, your model is only as good as your data. And a lot of times your data is not foolproof. It's, I use the example people constantly ask me, say, I want to look at lines. What line should I scrape and where from? Well, historical lines are all over the place. And some sites might have the opening line. Some sites might have the closing line. There's a huge difference between those. Grabbing the closing line from one book versus another book is a huge difference in and of itself. So it kind of goes back to the point of you're only as good as your data, and you got to make sure your data is pretty damn good. Let's move on here. A question came in from Periscope. We're actually live on Periscope today, last minute decision just to see how it would go. Do you think at some point in the future, these big books will not be allowed to turn away sharps? Either of you want to take that one first?
Kind of a legal regulation question that I
don't know.
I wouldn't be a qualified.
Yeah, I mean, there's 50 states, and all it would take is one state to put that in a regulation, and then we see how it went in that state. I guess. I mean, I guess I don't know the answer. I feel like the future could be divergent on that.
I think there's enough states that are open now or going to be open soon that have enough of a competition. Whereas as consumers, and I want to shout out to, I'm not sure, Jack, this is how much involved you are. I know Rufus is very involved with this. Is it the America's Betters Coalition? I want to get it right. And something I think is just tremendously important as we go forward in the regulated market in America. And one of the best ways to speak is to give your action to the places that are being fair. And when I say fair, that's a loaded word. Places with no delays. It is very, very hard to win into any kind of hold on sports. There's enough uncertainty, enough randomness. The markets are sharp enough. Even the original lines are fairly good in many instances. It's very hard to win. It is impossible to win if you tack on a delay, particularly a delay where the bookmaker or the people opposite your bet are then able to literally reject your very best bets. So the biggest thing, anybody who is looking in general for a future where the biggest books don't kick people out, the easiest way is, as customers, as a society, we should make the books that are already not kicking the customers out the biggest books. Let's not assume that this is the biggest book and now let's go make some rule. Let's go take the guys that are really doing it right. The U.S. bookmakings of the world, the Circas of the world. And there's going to be more. I don't want to miss anybody. I don't want to miss a ton more who are doing this the right way and keeping that, I'll say, American value of fairness up and front forward in their marketing. Let's try to give those books our business. When the line is the same, when it's even 1 cent worse, let's give the bet to U.S. bookmaking. Let's give the bet to Circa and not to the other books that have the delays and are limiting customers.
Yeah, that's sort of a voting with your dollar kind of idea, and I like that. But just more from an industry business side of things, I think this is if you're a sports book and you do want to kind of break in and become a bigger player, there's a branding problem, right? Because there's a ton of marketing dollars. There's a lot of established brands. These brands are compelling brands. They have a lot going for them, and you're starting out and you say, I want customers, and that's a branding problem. And for me, the number one kind of brand that you could grab that is up for grabs really is that fairness brand, this is where we do it right. This is where, there's a whole set of, I'm not a marketing person, but there's like a whole set of branding ideas and concepts you could build around that. And I think it makes a ton of sense I think somebody will kind of grab that kind of branding space and run with it and, see as far as they can get. My opinion is that that's going to have a lot of legs, especially if there's something real behind the branding, especially if, if there is something kind of clearly differentiated about how the book works, obviously the better your marketing is and the better ideas you have and the more you build around that. It's one thing to just, put up an app and say, here, we take a bet, and then not do the marketing work too, to show but if you built the whole thing and you did all the jobs well, I think that has a lot of legs.
I agree with that, definitely. And we as consumers do need to vote with our dollars because that's going to be the biggest change. And we also need to inform other people, kind of expose that glass ceiling that a lot of people don't see. I think that's the right thing to do. Let's take another question here from Zoom. Quick question. I know individual books. This is Chip Chase is asking this. Sorry, I haven't been telling people who's asking the question. Chip Chase asks, quick question. I know individual books do not appreciate when you pre-game bet both sides of a game attempting to hit a middle. What about attempting to hit middles using in-play betting? Is that a no-no from the view of most books, or is that understood as part of the game when offering in-play wagering?
Anybody offering a hold, and everybody should be very happy at any point whenever anybody plays any bet at any one time, whether it's.
I obviously I agree with that. I want every bet anyone wants to make, basically.
So we had one of the very first live college basketball games that we had with a client of ours in March, and this was right when the quarantine stuff was happening, and we weren't sure what to do, and I was trying to do this game. I was sitting in my living room. I didn't have the right setup. I made a mistake. It happens to all of us. I made a mistake. I had the wrong score was in. Our data feed didn't have the right score. I didn't correct it. The thing was like up there and I couldn't see it, and I put the wrong. So it was like off by like 2 points. So, and sure enough, I saw that our client operator had taken a bet that was certainly far in the customer's interest. I think that my back of the envelope math of the customer was holding 15 to 16% on that bet. So I was like, well, maybe this quarantine thing is not so easy.
Right.
This is literally like the night before it ended.
So we have a whole setup here that's designed to prevent those mistakes from happening, right? And then this whole work from home quarantine thing happened. And we kind of got on the train about a week earlier than everyone else. And so we moved our whole operations team, I guess, into his living room.
That was just me in my living room. We started the operation. It was growing pains of what happens when you move stuff around, right? So then it was like, it was my game. I'm supposed to be the guy that doesn't make mistakes. So it was my game. And the game was like up there. Well, I made a little mistake. So the very next time out, the situation was different, and I hadn't made a mistake. And as a matter of fact, I really felt like the opposite side, it was an Iowa State game, and the better had taken a bet. It was like Iowa State, I think, -5 when the team was up by 9, and I thought they were up by 7. The model thought they were up by 7. So the next time out, they were still up like that. I think we had a line that was like, say it was 8, and it was like taking +8 was like a 4% bad bet. And the same bettor came across into our operator and took the 4% bet at +8. He was locking in his profit, right? But in a long run stance, all that had happened was I had lost my 15% on the first bet, but then rather than the bettor pocketing that 15% going home with it, he gave me 4% back right away on his very next bet. If I didn't want to take that bet from him, well, I'd just be out that 4% of the limit bet size. Right. And I mean, I really think that any operator that's looking at it like that is, I don't want to say it's like it ends up being personal, but I feel like sometimes that's the case. And a lot of times too, the bookmakers today, especially in the US, they're very handcuffed by their software, and that's changing fast. There's a question on this list. The question is, what has Deck Prism, our company, been doing? I'll tell you what, we've been really bolstering our platform to solve these software mistakes. I mean, we have the solve. We're going to be installing it with some clients coming up this year. And when that happens, when your software is not letting you get hit multiple times at the same number, when you don't have the issue, if you can't even really see what bet came in and what your position is and who did it come from as an operator, all of a sudden stuff like the one bettor playing both sides of a game just becomes much less important. And I would say, if you're trying to milk a bad bookmaker who's going to kick you out, do not play both sides of a game. Right. I mean, I can give you a list of tips, and I know Pat Parada was on it earlier. He had a good tweet at one point. I can give you a list of tips on like how not to get kicked out. Now, all of those tips are going to cost you money in the short term. So are they good ideas? I don't know. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. But something like betting both sides is just a tip to not get you kicked. If it's a bookmaker that's not going to kick you out anyway, you can bet both sides so you're blue in the face, whether that's in play, pregame, whatever, it won't matter. Yeah.
Okay, good. So there have been a couple of questions here in all of the different chats as to about in-game betting. There was a question on what is the best platform to watch a game to reduce the delay of the feed. Satellite and HD seems pretty bad. There was a question on given some unscrupulous practices, would you suggest only betting in-game during stoppages of game action? Do you guys want to address any of that real quick in terms of
I would recommend not betting into delays. Don't bet into delays in play. So that may lead into timeouts more often, for sure.
Yeah, I think. I mean, for sure. I think. Well, so in the book we recommend only betting in play during timeouts, and the main reason for that is because there's no question the book is going to have, unless you've gone out of your way to get lightning fast information, which is whatever. The book's going to have the game information before you do, right? I mean, even if you do things to try to get a faster, feed regarding the first question. And I mean, you don't want to be betting into lines made by a book that has more information than you do. And the great thing about a timeout is that for the most part, there are exceptions, but for the most part, things don't happen during timeouts. And so it's kind of a period where both sides have the same information, and then you can bet because you can analyze the information better than the book does, which is entirely doable. So what Matt said about the delay, I mean, the delays are so bad because, delays are bad for two reasons. One is if you bet while the action is going, then the delay actually allows game to happen, right? So just to be clear what the delay is, let's say I make a $500 in-play bet and they put me on an 8-second delay. That means they're just going to put your bet on ice for 8 seconds. They're not even going to look at it. And then in 8 seconds, they're going to decide whether they want the bet or not. Well, if the game's going, obviously 8 seconds of game can play during that 8 seconds. And, you've made a decision and the book is going to have 8 more seconds of information than you do. That's not great. But even during timeouts, the delay is not good, because what happens is that the book, and I'm not saying this is, anything like the book basically sees incoming betting information, and whoever's trading the number, and this might not even be someone at the book. This might be someone, like, let's say it might be a third party, like us, for instance, or it might be, there's, third party providers for the in-play lines, and they're going to see betting information come in, and they're going, and their data feed is going to update. So during that 8 seconds, they're going to get information, even if nothing happens on the field. They're still getting information during those 8 seconds. And if they make an adjustment to the line, during those 8 seconds that causes you not to get the bet, well, guess what? That was 8 seconds. That information informed their decision, and that was information you didn't have access to, right? So that's the reason why even during a timeout, betting delay is bad, is because fundamentally, no matter what, that 8 seconds provides whoever's making that decision with 8 seconds of extra information than you're going to have when you make the bet. So that's why delays are bad. During timeouts, they're less bad, but they're bad, period. And there are definitely, and I think there will be more as time goes on, people who are willing to accept in-play bets, especially during timeouts, with zero delay. There's no technological reason a bookmaker would have to put a delay on an in-play product in a game that's in timeout. I mean,
I'm expecting to see no delay products while the ball's flying down the field in the next couple of years.
Yeah.
Lower limits, larger holds, but
I
don't see any reason. Even with the current data issues, it's hard to get real-time, accurate data. It's as hard as impossible. But even with those issues, I do expect to see no delay betting. And certainly if you're at a game and, you're watching the game, there's no delay and the guy's scoring a touchdown, bet the team that just scored. In a properly regulated free market, there should be no issue with doing that.
I agree. We got some questions here from YouTube, and I'm kind of going to blend some of them together. Question was asked, what was your evaluation of yesterday's New Jersey gaming report? Seemed pretty bearish. I guess I'm more the subject matter expert among the three of us on New Jersey
I didn't
gaming.
see that, so yeah.
I learned everything from your tweets.
Yes.
Okay.
On the subject, so.
We knew it was going to be bad. I didn't think it was as bad. I think there were some silver linings in there. They made $80 million in revenue. The operators did from iGaming, from internet casinos in the state. That's actually pretty decent when you consider. And that was more than double what had been made in April of 2019. So poker was about a $5 million rake in the state. And I've dabbled in some poker online in New Jersey. It's never been great because it's all the same regulars every time you log in. But yet in the last month or so, I log in and there's people I've never seen before who just are not playing optimally, who are clearly
sort of like we used to see. Just like we are, yeah.
Sort of like we used to see back in the day. So, and that kind of dovetails into another question that came in for Ed, and that is, in your opinion, is poker worth playing in 2020? Is there money in the game, whether it be live or online?
Well, I think live poker is not really a thing at the moment, and I would personally not recommend, risking the COVID just to get some poker hands in. And personally, I mean, I don't think that's a good trade-off to make.
We know that's a big sacrifice in your life, Ed, not getting to play some live poker.
Yeah, well, yeah.
You think online poker will make a comeback, though?
I think it is making a comeback at the moment. I think it's possible it'll just be temporary due to the weird quarantine thing. I always thought, and I still think, that if we see a wave of kind of online legalization around the country, because for a while, like I remember when Nevada legalized online poker. I mean, it was years ago. I want to say it was like 8 years ago now. And at the time, I was like, this could be the start of 25 states legalizing online poker. That seemed entirely plausible to me at the time. And I was like, well, if 25 states legalize online poker within a couple of years, I mean, like we're seeing with sports betting, right? I mean, this is This is and if that were to happen, and especially if they could kind of pool player pools, but even if not, I thought there was going to be a little renaissance of online poker that would last maybe 2 years, where it would really, I mean, if you could get pretty good at online poker and, that it would be a really, truly viable way to basically make a living, spend some time grinding poker. And then it just didn't happen. I mean, it just, Delaware, I think, legalized it. And then New Jersey obviously was the big one that did, but then it kind of sat there. I think just those 3 states for several years.
Yes.
And that really bummed me out. I mean, that's, I was always like, well, wait till California does it. Well, I'm still waiting. I don't know. I guess that's my answer. My answer is and then when the sports betting thing happened, I thought there was a chance that, poker would kind of coattail on the sports betting, and that they would say, well, let's legalize the online sports betting. And then, oh, by the way, why don't we have poker and iGaming too? And that doesn't quite seem to be what's happening either.
I think the players are too good now. I think that
they are, but I still think there's, at lower limits, there's not really. I think if 25 states, tomorrow 25 states legalized it, I think you could go grind 50 cents a dollar no limit and not be run into they're too good problem. I think there would be enough people.
My point of the too good problem is not that you personally will run into the people that are too good, but what I think really drove the game in 03, 04, 05 was that anybody without a clue could go sit down in a game at a reasonable limit and not lose their money too fast. Right. The games were so good that you could sit down in a game with nobody that played good at it. I'm not talking 50 cents a dollar. Right. I'm talking about a reasonable limit. So that allowed some people to actually win that were terrible, and certainly kept the ecosystem going for a lot longer. Now, I don't play online poker at all. So like, Jack, if you play, you're going to have a better feel of this than me. But when I have seen games, they look so tough that if you put a fish in the game, one, everyone knows who the fish is a dumb word, a new player. If there's a player that is not usually in the game, that everybody, the players that are sitting there, waiting for they see it. The next thing you know, there's a full game. There's 1 or 2 players in that game that are much worse than the rest of the table. And at that point, they have no chance. And that, to me, is just completely different than the games from 03, 04, 05. And I think that leads it to be, I'd say, almost too chess-like. I also remember poker is somewhat of a solved game now. There's a machine you can't beat playing heads-up limit. I think the no-limit bots are pretty darn good, too. I think that poker's in our rearview mirror.
Yeah, I think, what I would say is, if you like poker, go play poker, but don't think you're going to make a ton of money playing online poker. I think that's pretty hard to do.
Okay, good. There was a question here in YouTube I thought was interesting. What experience or education are you looking for when hiring new employees at Prism?
Well, it depends on well, on a trader level, we actually more or less require no experience.
So we have we have 2 roles, obviously. So our primary thing. So we have 2 primary roles here. One is we have software development, and 2 is we have trading. So we have basically people who build the tools and the platform and all the software we use to run the models, to deliver the models, to the answers to customers, to do all that stuff in real time, redundancy, make sure we don't go down, all that stuff, to take in data, to all that stuff. So we have all that software development, right? So those are software developer jobs. And I think our requirements for that are...
We like experience on the software development.
Yeah, of course, right? That's a software development job. And then we have the trader jobs. And the trader's job is basically to use the tools to, watch the game, put the numbers up, use the models, use the tools that we've built, to provide kind of the human finish. A lot of our stuff is automated or semi-automated, but our kind of philosophy is that we try to automate everything up to the point where a human doing it would be better. And then we put the human there, right? So that's the trader's job. The trader's job is to be the human that kind of gets the whole thing over the line. And yeah, that was actually our hiring philosophy for traders. Was we actually asked for no experience in sports betting industry when we hired traders because the way that we're doing it, our kind of approach is different, I would say, than what I think people would have. We didn't want to have to unlearn certain things. I mean, there are a few reasons, but yeah, that was we want fast thinkers. That's kind of our sort of interview battery or whatever. What we're kind of looking for are people who can do math, simple math, but can do it fast, can do it accurately, can kind of think logically quickly. That's what we're looking for, and not necessarily people with sports betting experience. People who like sports obviously is good, but not people who have sat in sports books for the last 10 years.
Okay, interesting. Are you guys good for about 10 to 15 more minutes here?
Mm-hmm.
Sure. I got the weekend off, so
Yeah. Oh, hey, there you go.
We're good.
No sports, right? I mean, I'm telling you, I'm taking advantage of these weekends.
Don't we have German soccer starting up this weekend?
We don't do German soccer, so I'm okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Someday soon, maybe. But at least for now, we're not in the.
Yes, we are not in the German soccer business yet.
Okay, so I'm going to make a last call here for anyone who wants to get some questions in. We'll finish out what we got on the queue. If you want to get a question in on Zoom, you can put it in the Q&A section. You want to do it on YouTube in the chat window. If you're watching us on Periscope, you can do that in the Periscope chat window as well. Okay, so there's a question that's been sitting here for a while. For someone that doesn't have a math or coding background, how can someone begin to integrate those methods into a handicap? How can newcomers maximize the value in lower tech Excel-based models? I'll take this first, and you guys can kind of add in as you need be. I don't have a math or coding background. I got started using Excel. It was kind of the lowest barrier of entry to me. I was able to kind of do some things in Excel and follow some online tutorials when it came to learning about regression analysis and some of the tools that are in Excel. Some of the videos I've put out already kind of talk about how easy it is to make a quick model in Excel, how easy it is to scrape data in Excel. So Excel's not really lower tech. I would say Excel is probably the best possible tool given the audience that it reaches and given the ease of use that it has. If you don't have a math background, though, you need to at least be willing to learn. You need to understand what some of the principles of data science are, of data analysis, and you need to take those and consider that you might not be looking at the entire picture as best you need to if you don't have a math background. One of the mistakes I made early on was sample size. I would read into a small sample size. It's just natural. Another mistake that I made early on is that I didn't take into account, the biggest mistake I made early on is I would build a model and then test that model against the same data, which is just an awful mistake to make. It's probably the biggest mistake you can make in modeling. And I did it for a couple of years, time and again, and I wonder why this model that I created that seems to work, back testing never works going forward. Well, it's because the data that I used to build that model was the same data that I'm back testing it on, which then just creates corruption. So do you guys have anything to add in terms of tips?
I love Excel. We started, not we, me and Ed, but I started with Excel, 15, 16 years ago. So it's funny you said we still have stuff in Excel. And one of the things that keeps forcing us out of Excel, especially when it comes to the scraping, is Excel requires Microsoft Explorer. and some of the data sites are no longer supporting Microsoft Explorer, and that's when it's over.
Right. Yeah. There's 100%. So I barely know how to use Excel personally. My background, I got a computer science degree, and I have theoretically I'm a software developer. What I've seen, Excel is a very powerful tool, and you can do a lot with it. And I don't think there's any. If Excel is what comes naturally to you and is your knowledge base, I don't see anything wrong with starting there. and seeing how far you can go with it. I don't think there's any need to say, hey, no, I have to learn Python. I have to learn R. I have to do this other stuff. Having said that, I mean, I do use, kind of some of those other tools. I would say the number one skill is also not necessarily math. I think sometimes, people, I went to college 20 years ago. I got a computer science degree. I got a software development job. And then I spent, 15 years writing poker books, right? So I don't know all the fancy statistical techniques that have been coming out lately. I don't know them. I know some of them. I've been doing some, some continuing education, call it, type of stuff where I've been trying to learn more modern techniques and, and incorporate them. But, for me, it's a learning process. For me, the biggest advantage, I know, we produce really good sports models. And I see a lot of sports models that I don't think are good. And I think a lot of the people that produce those models actually know a whole lot more math than I do.
We have people that work for us that run circles around us on some of this stuff.
Right.
And we still write the best sports models.
Right.
They working on the application platform stuff. These are people that run circles around us.
And the thing is, we called our book The Logic of Sports Betting for a reason, because I think logic is kind of the secret sauce into a lot of what we do. I mean, a lot of the problems we solve are really tricky logic problems where the data has biases in it that are not obvious. And if you analyze it this way, you run your this regression, or you throw it into that model or whatever, and there's a systematic bias in what you've done that you could tease out if you understood the sport and understood, thought about what you were looking at logically. But if you don't do that correctly, you end up with bias in, and then you end up with bias out, and then your answer sucks, right? And furthermore, like a lot of people that I see build models, there's no check. I mean, and this has been my issue with the COVID models too, is like there's no wrong. Like they have a model, and the model says the answer is this, and then they just say, oh, that must be the answer, right? And there's no going back and saying, there's no more. They don't compare it to a market. They don't compare it to other people's opinions. Really, they're not comparing it to any standard, right? Where they say, well, the answer should be this. I mean, this is the right answer, right? Whatever that means in a sports betting market, often that means what the market tells you the answer should be, or at least, taking what the market has to say seriously. And, I think a lot of the bad models come from people who almost know too much math, but don't apply enough logic to what they're doing, and don't respect other sources of information enough, and that's sort of my take. So that would be my thing. I don't think you need to know a ton of math. I don't think you need to know a lot of programming, but I do think you need to be fastidious about your logic, about exactly what question you're asking, exactly what data you have, and exactly whether the methodology you're applying answers that question without a bias. And to me, that's the most important thing.
It's sometimes simple.
No, go ahead, Matt. Go ahead.
I was just sometimes simple. What Ed was saying reminded me. I listened to it. I think I've listened to 3 podcasts now in my life. I'm not a podcast listener, but the Spanky and yourself, Jay, I've listened to a few podcasts now. I listened to Matt Metcalf, who's the sportsbook director. I'm not sure that's the proper. He runs the Circus Sportsbook, and he was talking about how they made their college football openers last year, and it was literally him with like a power rating type back of the envelope model, and another guy with a similar type model. I mean, I don't want to undersell these people. These are like some of the sharpest, but just 2 sets of really well thought out numbers, and they put those together. And I'm quite sure that if you had used their number to bet into some of the the other openers that would come out, I would have liked to have all of those bets. And to me, it's just another example of how bringing together logic and particularly 2 different ways rather than one can quickly trump even one really drilled down approach to make it a number.
Fair enough. A couple other quick questions here. How can the U.S. sports betting industry avoid the online poker problem that you were discussing, where games are becoming too tough, too challenging, or does that not matter? And I guess what this question is really saying is, as the market becomes more efficient, will that mean they'll be tougher to beat in terms for bettors to beat? Technically, yes, they will. I think we're a long way from where the U.S. sports betting market becomes too efficient to even bother with. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, go on.
I was just gonna say my comment before was basically, what's called like the poker economy, which is like how long will people that are going to lose in the long run, how long will they play? And that comes down to, hold versus entertainment. The lower the hold versus the more entertainment, the longer they'll play. And this is why, some of the sports leagues, they should want no holds. If there's no holds, right, people will play all day. They'll watch the game. They'll buy the beer. And lower holds will make people's money last longer and get them more interested in play longer. Whereas in poker, the actual hold is a combination of the rake and the skill level of the players. Where if you're able to make a perfect line of sport, which is obviously never possible, but in a theoretical universe where you have a perfect line, well, then it's like a table game at that point. You hold the hold. You want a 4% hold, you hold 4%. You want the players to play longer and lose their money slower, you hold 2%.
Right. Yeah, I think this is actually a key point about the industry, and it's an interesting question because let's ignore the regulatory, the taxes and however the tax structure is set up, which is the excise tax and all that stuff. Let's ignore that for a second. Let's just pretend that's zero. It's not, but let's just pretend it's zero. The marginal cost of offering a bet to a customer is close to zero, right? For an operator. Once the operator has the software for an online bet, that is basically, onboarding one more customer and allowing that customer to click the button for the bet. It's a very low marginal cost, right? So sort of the theory of economics would say that when you're selling a service that has a very low marginal cost to you, the sort of steady state industry answer would be that the price would be very, very low too, right? That's sort of basic microeconomics. And that's what Matt's saying is that what does it mean for a sports bet to have a price that's very low? It means the vig is very low. It means the hold's low. And, obviously there's a few things that throw a wrench in that as far as sports betting works. One is that there's no such thing as knowing what the line is. There's a skill gap. There's always going to be people who are better, always going to be people who are worse. And as a business, you have to make money like against all your customers, and you have to set that up that way. But yeah, the steady state for the industry, and this is certainly true. Again, what he said for the leagues is 100% true. Is if I'm a sports league, what do I want out of sports betting? I want everybody to break even, so all they do is sit there and watch my sport all day long. That's what I want the sports betting industry to do. I want all the bets to break even and everybody to just be addicted. That's not the right word, but like nobody win money, nobody lose money. It's just a fun thing that just goes on and on and on, and people watch the games. That's what and that's what honestly a lot of the kind of players in the industry could or should want. And and so to me, that's the end. If your answer is how do you make the industry more sustainable, it's that. You have to focus on what can we do to offer this product at a price that's lower, a price to the customer that's closer to the marginal cost to us, which is close to zero. So anything you can do to get that down is going to make the industry more sustainable and bigger over the long term. And and regulations get in the way. Sometimes regulations are written in a way that makes that more difficult to do. This is, regulations can get fixed or tweaked. And then there's a technology problem. The sportsbook operators, a lot of the reasons why Matt touched on this before, but a lot of the reasons why sportsbook operators behave the way they do and the ways that frustrate people, and I know a lot of the people watching this have the same frustrations, is they don't actually have the technological solution backing them to behave in a different way. If we didn't do this, we would lose money. And they're right. And that's because the technology is not there for them to support that. So that's what the industry has to do. The industry has to build a technological infrastructure to enable, lower margin betting and all that stuff. So that's the sort of long-term answer. But yeah, the short answer is lower margin betting will be a more sustainable industry.
One of the things that I floated years ago before we even repealed PASPA was, why doesn't the NFL start a betting exchange and offer the lowest possible price, 1%, 2% commission, and run the betting exchange? It would increase. They run the ticket exchange. You sell secondary tickets in the NFL, you go through the NFL ticket exchange. Run the NFL betting exchange and have them take a very small commission. And how many billions of dollars would they do in handle if they ran a betting exchange? Now, they don't want to get their hands dirty, and for good reason. But
exchanges are very tricky.
If they did like a ticket exchange, it wouldn't be a small hold.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, it's
but I think it's a great idea.
I do. I mean, I definitely agree with the premise. It's easier said than done is what I would say about it. But yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Exchanges are very, very, very tricky because you either need the liquidity to already be there, and I don't know much about financial markets, but I feel like that could be the case with like some of the options markets and et cetera. But if the liquidity is not already there, then you face a situation where somebody's seeding it. Okay, if they're seeding it, what information do they get? What do they get versus the players on the market? Exchanges are tough.
I agree. So I got a couple questions here that have popped up multiple times. And so that these people don't think I was completely avoiding them, let's just fire through some of these questions real quick. What sport markets are most mature, i.e. race to the bottom? Conversely, what markets are trailing in the race to the bottom? I'm going to try to decipher this question. I think he's asking what sports are the most efficient and what sports are trailing in efficiency. Anyone?
What do you think, Matt?
I saw the question, and the guy that asked the question, I have the utmost respect for it. I don't really understand it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think I would say the most efficient are English Premier League, the NFL. These are markets that just tend towards efficiency. Inefficient would be something more like WNBA. I think that's
in-play is less efficient. Here's a way to look at it. How many bets were taken for how much money? So you've got two different variables, right? You got your total volume, and you got how many clicks from the opening line until the time you're looking at it. And then if it's a little bit more complicated, because if it's a market like any of the sports, you can go back other weeks, But if you just look at it from a standpoint of how many clicks, how much volume, say worldwide, that would be I would guess a fairly good way to order it from the sharps to the least sharp. I think time is more important than the markets. Where you want to beat college football, well, don't watch the NFL. While everyone else that you're competing with is watching the NFL, making their NFL bets, study the college, especially if it's week 1, week 2. Look for quarterbacks who got hurt at the end of these games, or that didn't come out of the games that are hurt, that the market's not going to know about up on open. I feel like there's 2 or 3 a week. If you want to beat the NBA, try to pick on the smaller markets that have the most like variance day to day, like as they open, versus which market is better, which period of time in the market is better. If in play can be the same way. Find a spot where consistent. One of them, I think this is in the book. I honestly don't remember. The NBA. I wrote an NBA model some years ago, and then I realized that the game has changed. And one of the ways the game has changed is the pace, because the pace has gotten much faster, or it hasn't really got faster as the fourth quarter. It's like faster everywhere else. And I definitely noticed the in-play markets that were mostly in line with the model that I had written the openers being fairly close to the beginning of the fourth quarter, and then the totals getting bet down very quickly. And then it doesn't take much thinking about how the game had changed, and obviously knowing kind of what's in those models, to realize what they're doing wrong. They're just taking they're taking the expected pace in the second half and kind of spreading it out versus the reality of which is it's faster in the third quarter. I think that's in the book, but either way, there's an example of and then you catch that right away. You catch it as soon as they're putting that number out, and it's just some guy that wrote a model 5 years ago.
Right. I mean, that's definitely. I mean, the answer is, I mean, the most efficient markets are what is the biggest. I mean, in general, and there's some exceptions, but what is the bet that's taking the most money and that the most people have eyeballs on? I mean, NFL sides, NBA sides, Premier League, all that stuff. It has pregame. I mean, zillions of people are looking at those markets, and every time that price moves, I mean, somebody's slamming in a bet because they think they have a 0.5% edge on it, and I mean, that's an efficient market. And then what's an inefficient market? It's the ones that either aren't up for very long, or that you can't get much down on, or that are different from book to book, or that are regional sports that aren't available everywhere.
Another way to look at it is just there's different types of games even within a market. Like take, for instance, college football. Let's say it's week 7 and, Penn State's 7-0 and Ohio State's 7-1 and, the game's in Penn State and, you ask 10 people to make a line and they're all like, pick, the game's about pick, right? It's just easy. You're comparing two similar teams. All the information's in front of you. It's easy. It's easy to quantify. It's easy to figure out how to make it. Now, how about Alabama's playing Kent State in week 2, right? You're still talking about or even week 7. I mean, to keep the week shouldn't be a thing. But you have a situation where you're talking about the same thing. It's a college football spread. But on one hand, all you have to do is decide which of these teams is better. And you have teams that are like well-known and close to each other. Or the question is exactly how many touchdowns is Alabama going to score before? And you think about the variables that go into this. When is Saban going to pull his starters? What kind of game plan is Kent State going into the game with? What kind of game plan is Alabama going to use? Is Waddell going to return punts today, or is this a good time for him not to do that? And all of a sudden, you have all these extra variables it's kind of the same market, but it's really not, right? I'm sure that it's easier to beat how many points will Alabama beat Kent State by than who's going to win between Penn State and Ohio State, even though it's theoretically the same market.
Right.
All right.
Yeah, it's a great example.
That was some really good content there, Matt. Thanks for that. Ed, there was a question here that kept popping up on Periscope. In your opinion, is having players' cards good or bad in televised poker?
Players' card?
Yeah, I mean, seeing the whole card.
The whole cards.
Oh, I mean, the poker boom wouldn't have happened without it. So sure, it's great. I mean, yeah.
There you go. That question was popping up enough times that I figured we had to address it. All right, guys. There were a couple other questions here we didn't get to. I'll try to jump into that chat there on YouTube and answer them as well. But I thank you so much for your time. This has been really good. I hope the audience learned some things. We're going to put this on YouTube so people can watch this for the rest of time. And if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe. There's other content like this on this channel. Give it a thumbs up just to know that you appreciate the work.
What you're doing here is great, Jack. And anyone who watches, hit the subscribe button. The subscribe button, I know, really helps more of this content appear.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate that. Sure. There's also a link to their book, The Logic of Sports Betting. It's in the description below. Full disclosure, I get like $1.50 if they would probably even less than that. No, because I probably get about 52 cents for the affiliate sale of your book through that Amazon. Right. So
even better.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
So anyway, thank you to Ed Miller and Matthew Davidow for helping us out today and sharing this happy hour with us. Take care, everyone.